once you have the data ecosystem, what will go is what I call intelligent systems. So when you think about democratizing data, descriptive and diagnostic analytics will no longer sit with people analytics because it will become into a product. And many people are introducing products, but we don't have that ecosystem. The product fails. There's nothing. The product is wrong. So you technically don't need, why is someone leaving? And you don't need to do like your analysis behind the scene using a data scientist. Mm-hmm. Machines will tell them. And right now with all kinds of changes happening in the AI world.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Arun Chidambaram, who's a global head of people analytics at GE Healthcare. During the episode, Arun talks about the 6 key skills every people analytics leader needs. He talks about the current state of people analytics and the opportunities that lie ahead, and also the current analytical dexterity in HR and what skills are critical to raise the bar. As always, before we jump into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. With that being said, let's jump in. Arun, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Thanks, Chris. Doing great. Good to see you always.
Yeah, I know.
It's springtime here in New Jersey, so looking forward to it.
Nice.
I think we missed a nice winter this year.
Is it still freezing cold or?
No. I think we had only probably one day of, not even, you cannot call it snow, but
really?
I'll take it. Yeah. So
you got lucky.
It messes up some statistics for some folks, but not for me.
Yeah, our people analytics, do you have a predictive model for the weather?
No, not on the weather.
No one has one. Even the weather people are always wrong. I'm like, wait a minute, that's your job. That's all.
Yeah, but doing good. I'm looking forward to the spring right now. It looks beautiful outside.
Nice. Let's just jump straight in, because we could talk forever. Sure. So what do you think is I'd love to talk about the current state of people analytics right now and some of the opportunities that we have ahead of us. So let's jump in there.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Nice question there. When you look at the state of current state, I just want to go one step on what is people analytics. Like, what is the goal of a typical people analytics function? And as you know, it's actually the 16th year for me in this space. And in a nutshell, like what our function's job is to, make better talent decisions daily using data to create value for our customers and our shareholders, in our case, our patients, and more importantly, our colleagues, right? That's in a nutshell. And when you double click one more into that, what is that goal? Where do I spend? Where does my team spend? Where does this function spend time? Is mainly with HR folks for sure, and business leaders, right? And when I reflect on my 15 years journey in this space in HR, 2 words are coming to my head, Chris. One I call is around effectiveness of this function, and the second is efficiency. And in a nutshell, like, what is effectiveness? To make it simple, like, effectiveness is, are you doing the right thing? And efficiency is, are you doing the thing right? Mm-hmm. Right? And you'll be surprised, for the longest time, even me being in this space, I thought we were doing the right thing. And there is always a challenge of the efficiency, which is like, do I have the right resources? Do I have the right tools? Can I scale this function, etc.? Those pieces came in. And I always thought that it is efficiency where the challenge is. And I'll give you a simple example. So in the current role at GE Healthcare, in my first couple of years, I was working on a very great project on getting engineering efficiency, right? And it's for a large business segment for us. And we spent about 8 months working very closely with business leaders, great HR team. And as I started getting into the project, the bigger challenges was not having the right data in place, right? But we leveraged, network science. We did all kinds of this, what we call the sexy, cool, analytical thinking to solve that big problem. But as I started coming out of the project, the things that really did not work were not having data in the right form, not having a governance. So for the longest part, I thought those are all not the cool things or things I should be doing when I said doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and over the last 16 months, we've changed that mindset. So we started building this capability, and many of my analytical friends probably will not like this around the when I call out maturity of analytics, there's a classic four you've probably heard hundreds of times, which is you start off with the what is happening from a descriptive analytics to prescriptive, and it has come in many forms and shape, right? But I think that is simple to explain to leaders, like what does that maturity look like?
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge was we were more excited about the middle part, the predictive analytics, and all the more deep dive analytics. What is happening is that the trend is coming back towards this space of descriptive analytics right now. There's actually a nice debate going around on what should be, which leads me to that: what am I doing the thing right versus doing the right thing? We said that we need to focus really on what I call it data ecosystem. In fact, there's a fantastic article by Capgemini on data ecosystems. And I'll give you a very simple way. It's a very scary statistics. If you look at on one axis, you can think about technology and tools in the data space. And the other axis is process, which is your culture, skills, discipline, behaviors, all that on other axis. 70% of the organizations, according to that research, are in that data, what they call low, and you don't have the right process. It's called data laggards. And only about 10 to 15% are in the data mastery, which is on the other extreme. When you are on that left side, and in fact, we are in that same 70, we are part of the 70, we are part of the norm. And then you have like people who are great with their discipline, but they don't have the money, but I think they call them like they're aware of that situation. And the people who are high on technology and tools, but don't have the behavior is kind of another branding they give for that group, but it's a very small percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about current state of people analytics, I think we want to spend more time on the space of data ecosystems, right? So in my current CHRO, we had a really nice chief people officer. And she had a very good point. She said, Arun, we don't get the basics here. And she came from a different lens, which made absolute sense. She's like, we don't have the absolute basic infrastructure. And what happens in this game is when you're trying to do, your team is doing great stuff, but it's like, what happens is this, Chris, and I'll stop here and probably get your thoughts too. You do cool things, but you cannot scale it. When it's called, meaning you cannot adopt it. And when you don't adopt it, what happens? The HR leaders get frustrated. They said, yeah, it's all, you do cool things, but I don't have you. And I cannot reach them or scale them because I don't have this ecosystem. It's not even a question of not having a number of people. A lot of people have said, oh, I don't have a small team. Team will come in. You can have like 30 people in this scenario, and still you will not be able to achieve or reach scale because you have the wrong systems in place. You are in the data laggard. So if you focus on that space, you may not be doing the cool stuff, but on the long run, when you set that up, I think it's going to be extremely beneficial. So I think that's a space I feel is very, very important. So let me pause there and just see what you think.
It kind of feels like you're being pulled in two different directions. Because, the business wants you to deliver on those core projects, etc., and deliver. Right. But at the same time, you also need to figure out the basics, build a foundation, get the data right. So you're kind of like in this to and fro, back and forth.
I'm clearer right now, Chris. And I'm getting more clear because when I even looked at business, they have the same problem, by the way. Their systems are also not the cleanest, by the way. And it's all the companies I work with, it's the same scenario. So it's not like an HR thing, but if I am able to, through my team and my leadership and to the sponsorship, like, hey, I have a discipline, have standards, have governance, we still have files which float through Excel still. And we're trying to do Amazon's S3 and cloud. We do that, but you also have this extreme. So the type of data sharing complexities is all over. We have Teradata, we have Excels, we have Box, we have Then we have this ODP. We're going to do a one data platform. But what I'm saying is the behaviors are very, very critical. So I'm very clear that for a long-term success, that space needs, and as I said, there's 10 to 15% of the organization who do it right. And I don't know if you have chatted with Guru Setupati when he was with Capital One. I think he did a really good job of spending. He said, I'm just going to spend time on this. And it has been extremely helpful for that organization.
Mm-hmm.
But I've not heard many cases where they spend their energy. And it is good when your leadership also supports that thinking.
Right? Oh, yeah. I feel like you have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you not doing all these cool projects and doing X, Y, and Z for us? Well, we need to focus on this first.
Yeah, I think it makes absolute sense from where they're thinking. But initially, I mean, about a few years ago, I would have resisted this thought and said, like, oh, what the heck? I want to do more cool things. And like, that's what my friends are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I did cool things. But when it comes to frustration, when you think about your customer, when I said deliver better talent decisions to all, that all piece is not which will work if you do not have the right data ecosystem.
Well, that being said then, and we've asked this question a few times, but I feel like it's evolved over the years. In order to achieve this, what are the skills and competencies needed to be successful in the role as a people analytics leader?
That's a great question, right? It's very personal to me. So let me explain. I've been through, in my 16 years, through like some really good companies. I worked for Merck, ESPN, and Pfizer, and now at GE Healthcare. And when you look at like the evolution of, what is people analytics? Like, back then, it was not the state. I mean, it has transformed. Analytics in general has transformed, right? You did not have like a PhD in mathematics and like social psychology, neuroscience, etc. in that field. Absolutely not. But I think there are 5 or 6 things I think the skills a people analytics leader needs to have, and you'll be surprised. I'm not going to say anything to do with data, because a lot of people think that in fact we've been branded. You're the cool guys. You're the smart ones. You are the data folks. I mean, these are some of the names we get. So I'm like, we're not even the data. But data happens to be part of our job. We just do it, right? We need data to do our jobs. But I think I'll start with a nice analogy of an actor. What we do is if you look at some of the work we have done, like at when I was working with ESPN, the work was like, how does sales happen in ESPN? What does happen in a production shop? So when you try to solve a problem, you really need to understand what the business is, how the business works. Mm-hmm. So you learn about like how literally like the Monday night football show, how does that whole thing happen? So I had the opportunity to go through that. At Pfizer, both at Merck and Pfizer, it's like, how does a drug discovery happen? What are the different stages? And same thing with healthcare and GE Healthcare. Like when you look at how is an MR machine made, why do they make fewer MR machines, etc. So the reason I give these examples is, and it's just like an actor. An actor gets a scene. You need to act. You need to think about the history. If you're doing like a history kind of a role, you got to know exactly everything, right? So first, most important thing I would say is having a learning mindset. You clearly have to listen and learn. You cannot go with the attitude that I know everything. I am the data person. I know all these crazy data science models, blah, blah, blah. It's a very, very bad thing. Yeah. So, yeah. And I've seen people like, particularly.
I can imagine.
That's what, and I you get excited. I mean, it's not that they're intentionally doing. So I tell my team, like, calm down. Because when we run a project, Chris, data does not even come at the first 2 stages. We don't talk about data. We're like, what is the problem? Because analytics is equally about asking the right questions as much as about solving them. So it's not that we jump into data and start going crazy with data. So the learning mindset with that actor analogy I want to give is like, you got to have absolutely a learning mindset, right? The second is an interesting one. The second is you will be tested with some like things which are not logically making sense. And as you go closer to, leading teams, how decisions are made, you sit with, your business leaders, with even your, chief people officers in your HR leadership team. Sometimes, you got to park data and just think like, differently. So the balancing is very important. So you cannot be on 2 extremes. You cannot say that I have to work with gut or you cannot say, I'm going to be technical on every darn thing. And you got to come to a common ground, which means you need to have an attitude which is saying that, okay, I'll let loose. So things like, directionally correct and precisely wrong is the solution. It cannot be like saying extreme. And by having that behavior, you don't alienate folks too, because we're trying to do that, because people are sometimes scared to talk to us because they're like, oh, he might ask me a question. Is that a degree of my, I've been in situation. I try to train them. I said, just because my team knows data doesn't mean they're smart. And just because you don't are involved with data or data science doesn't mean you're not smart. It's a very important to create. It's about both sides need to engage, and you got to come to the common ground, which leads me to like the space of like, a people analyst, we need to be extremely tolerant, because there will be things people will say. I think a very, a long time, about 10 years ago, a good friend of mine from Denmark, Martin Anderson, I've not been super touch with him, but he did say something very good. He said, Arun, cognitive dissonance and what we do in people analytics is a very bad cocktail. So what he said is, when the moment you say, no, your answer, you're wrong through data, they'll start like tearing that apart. So you cannot go super technical on that. You got to have a common ground. So you got to be tolerant on that. You got to let go of certain things. You cannot try to solve every problem. You got to prioritize. And that comes from awareness. So you got to be extremely tolerant. Then comes when you're tolerant, how do you get things done, right? Is you need to have, this is a very critical skill, which is having influencing skills. We have to be assertive. We have to be reciprocal. We have to listen, like I said. And we have to keep the core value too. Because I'll give you a very good example. I will not tell which company, but it's definitely not GE Healthcare right now. But one of my prior companies, we were involved in forecasting headcount and what drives headcount.
Always fun.
They might, it's a good project. I think my team approached it. It was all great, but it was actually a senior partner in a very, from a great consulting company. So the person comes in, my team puts down the regression equation. You will not believe it. The person comes, he literally takes that equation and says, he literally says, oh, take that constant out and take the coefficient out. And so, can we put something else? And my team looks at me. They said, text me like, you handle this one. I go to the leader and say, do whatever you want. We are not signing off on that. You cannot change the regression equation, right? So you don't get angry on this. You just be very clear. Say, I'm not signing up because I will not, because that's when you don't lose value on that. You just can't say because the senior partner says, I'm going to do it. But you encounter it, how do you tackle it? And the leaders get it. So that's okay, fine, we'll take it offline and have another solution to it. But having that influencing skill is very important because it buys you, a relationship with the teams. Then three more, I will say, like patience is another one. Like I talked about the data ecosystem, even a project this morning I was working on, you require a wealth of patience. You just want, because nothing will be right for you. All this data is in one of the projects, we spent almost 2 months understanding data. They put you through all kinds of go to him, go to her, this doesn't work, this is what we have, blah, blah, blah. But when I was in the beginning of in the space of people analytics, it was very tough. But I tell my team, have patience, this is normal. Couple more and I'll stop here because one, this is very important to me. I call it humility, I wish I had a coach who had taught me that before, because when you are with data, it gets to, logically you're right, because you know exactly what the data means. And I've seen, including me in my earlier years, I could have been better, but there's always a learning, which is like, you don't try to understand where the HR team is coming from. They go through, if you don't know what an HR business partner really does, I was very one track on, oh, this is how data is, why aren't you getting it? Simple things I'll tell you about engagement surveys. I used to beat the engagement surveys as if it was like, why aren't you not getting, you're wrong. And now I understand what happens when an engagement survey, you can't pulse an entire organization every single day. It's a golden opportunity and they get the best out of it and make a decision, right? So this is the point I'm trying to make, that as an analytical leader, you just cannot say that, oh, data is wrong. It's you have to understand the other side. And I tell my team, like, just because you know data, don't try to like be act smart and say that I know. And I have a very fantastic team. But I've seen, I won't say it's my team here, but I've seen pockets where I could have been better in my past. But I definitely teach my team to be, more. It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And the last piece which you've heard is around the storytelling aspect.
I was wondering when you was going to throw that in.
I'm going to end that with storytelling. I think it's it goes with the movie analogy I gave. On to it ties back because we deal with complex data. You got to make it very simple because I'll give you this another analogy. You may be in a room with an audience where one person would be a Jackie Chan fan, another would be a Clockwork Orange fan. You might be in a room, but you got to please both of them. You cannot go on one extreme. So you got to. So it's more than like, I've seen a lot of things around storytelling, visual representation, colors, and all that stuff, which is great. But I think you will be surprised. You'll get a 10-minute on let's say on an executive leadership call. It'll convert into a 2-minute. So you got to tell your story in 2 minutes. Be ready for it. You got to anticipate what the next question is. So there's a lot more in how you present, how you train, how it's not about I did 3 months worth of data. They have to see everything. They don't have to see everything. They just need the final story. So it's very critical that it's a combination of consulting / storytelling skills, which is very, very critical in the space. So those are some of the spaces. And as I promised, I said there's nothing about any mathematical modeling.
I was going to say, like, that's the interesting part. Every single piece of advice you gave was nothing to do with technical capability.
Correct, it's not. It's a given, right?
And I've obviously I've led multiple functions in multiple roles, and you kind of don't find that out until you're in it. So, how do we prepare our people analytics teams and our leaders when you can't get taught those things in a university classroom? These are all things that you have to learn in the flow of work, if that makes sense. The hard way sometimes.
At least what the leaders can do is, the next generation, right? About leaders, I want my team members to be the best people analytics leaders. So at least that's a good, that's what many of my peers also do. I have some fantastic peers, but that's the message I would give to someone who's coming into this function, wants to create a career out of it, just to understand the other side, not just be like data driven, or don't be branded as the smart guy. Please don't be that smart guy.
You need to understand both sides of the fence. Do you feel like, we had this conversation for HR for years, like HR seat at the table. Do you feel like people analytics now has a seat at the table?
It is. I'll tell you, it's a great question, right? So I'll give you my perspective, and it could change with others. Over the last 3 years, I would say 4 years. See, I think I don't know if I had this chat with you, but let me know what you think. This function was a luxury until 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why most of us, we want to do the cool things. We never thought about the scaling. We never thought about the efficiency. We don't thought about the effectiveness. Now it's becoming a business need. So, and it has not become a business need for all, let me to get there. But most forward-looking CHROs are thinking of this function as a business seat. That itself is saying that we have a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that as everyone has.
Sure.
Because that's the trend we're going in. Maybe another 3 to 5 years, it will become more like, very crystal part of we still don't, it's not 100% there, because if you grab about 10 people analytics leader and you have a very good network, chances are they all have a different reporting relationship.
Yeah, they do. Mm-hmm.
Or they're at different levels. How they want to integrate your overall HR strategy is going to be different. So on that space, that's where that business need becomes more clear. I would say in another 3 to 5 years, it will be just like a business partner. We're very clear on where this function should sit.
Do you think that people analytics should sit underneath HR? Or do you think it should be separate?
That's a debate I've had. I have two sides of the coin. I've heard some companies where it's part of a central analytical COE.
Yes.
But But I think wherever it sits, what is most important is you need to understand how human resources operates. You need to understand the mechanics of human resources. You just cannot be like, hey, it's not analytic aiding human resources, also human resource helping you. And as long as that bridge is there, whether a report under an analytical COE, because there are pros and cons to both, Chris. Because if you're an analytical COE, you're surrounded with the right kind of resources. You might be able to shift, you might be able to gain, you might be able to go across many other analytical. The learning power on analytics is high. But if you're part of HR, your understanding of HR is more. I would say staying under HR would be a better option because many analytical leaders, because now that the field is growing, right, you have all kinds of leaders coming into the space and which who are analytically very strong. Where they're not strong is how human resource operates. So if you're under that umbrella, it works. So I think it is, I don't pick one or the other. It depends on how much HR knowledge you have, but it's not about just giving analytics to HR. It's also taking HR into analytics.
Yeah, like you mentioned before, right? You have to have both sides to understand. Where do you see the future of people analytics?
Yeah, with 3, 4, I did talk about the luxury versus business need, which is the future because it is setting, and that kind of is the first spot that in another 5 years, the identity of this function will be more clearer to the audience and exactly what we do. Even if it's simplest things like, when an HR leader I've started seeing that when HR leader says, "Oh, I have a background in talent management, rewards, blah blah," and I'm started seeing analytics as well. Right? But if you look at 10 random folks, they still don't have it. So that'll happen. That's one. So the business need. I think this space of data governance, I think that will become a reality because it's sliding back again into the space where the functional setting is making sure that the basics is right. This effectiveness, efficiency space I'm talking about, data engineering, chief data office, building that data ecosystem powerhouse is very critical. So I think they will spend more time, and that will become a norm for people analytics leaders saying that is important to create a world-class organization in analytics. There's a third one which is very interesting, which I think it's going to happen. Once you have the data ecosystem, what will go is what I call intelligent systems. So when you think about democratizing data, descriptive and diagnostic analytics will no longer sit with people analytics because it will become into a product. And many people are introducing products, but we don't have that ecosystem. The product fails. There's nothing. The product is wrong. So you technically don't need. Why is someone leaving? And you don't need to do like your analysis behind the scene using a data scientist. Machines will tell them. And right now with all kinds of changes happening in the AI world. But I think it's very, very important if you are thinking that, I am going to be running reports and I will be telling why someone left or what some of the projections or forecasting is. The machine will tell.
It'll be doing it automatically. You kind of schedule it to do it every quarter, every whatever.
Correct. So my job technically is at risk. So if I think that I'll be available for the next 10 years, I think that will change and you need to understand. So more time will be spent on the top two, what should happen and what could happen logic. So that is.
Well, it's even more important to have those soft skills then, right?
Correct. So that's exactly right. So you know how to go at governance, what does it mean? So the soft skill becomes very critical. So that is where the direction. And I think there's one more I would say is, I think it was through, I don't know, I'm quoting it right, but it was CEB before Gartner bought it, but I think it was CEB, where they had some really good chart on, I still remember it very importantly, and it's very important to do with data. So they called it 3 zones, and I think it was, on one axis is like the insights you can give, and the other axis is the kind of data access you have. So what most organizations today have is they called it the zone of commons, which is basically engagement surveys, very simple things where you use in HR data, no one questions you. Then the second is the zone of debate. This is where you use metadata, email, like Microsoft Workplace Analytics, you use calendar data, text, daily text, listening, daily listening, employee listening, which is happening, right? And the third is what they call the zone of reticence, where, no one does that, at least very few companies. And I don't know, that's right, in my opinion, where you have chips inside body and, tracking next day's mode, blah, 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 very deep dive. And I don't think that's, in my humble opinion, we are there and they shouldn't be there. But the zone of debate is becoming more common right now, right? Which is, if you have the right influencing skills, you have the right ethical governance, if you have, what that whole structure, I mean, you've heard a lot on ethics and privacy with this particular function, right? That, when it becomes more robust along with a great data ecosystem, then you can get into this whole concept of employee listening will be much cleaner and more powerful because you are doing the right thing. And that's a space I think we have not touched it. It's not like we don't use text data because we don't even have a governance. So when and I'm talking about this function as a whole, not at my company, I'm just talking at every company.
Yeah.
Once you have proper governance in an ecosystem, then you can leverage. And I think that's a direction I think it will head, and that zone of debate will become more like the zone of commerce. So that's another space. I would say another
Love it.
5 years on that. So those are some of my thinking of where this field will be heading.
Interesting. Before I let you go, I have a question, which is something I don't normally ask, but it just came to my mind. Because we're going to post this out, right? Many of your peers are going to see this. If there was one question you wanted to ask your peers and colleagues, what would that be? And then I'm going to post that and share it with our community. If there's one question you're like, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on this, and we can post it and see what people's feedback are. Because I'd love to see what reactions we get.
I think the thing which is coming, it's fuzzy, but it's coming to my head. I think what is coming to my head is, I call it the last mile problem. And I think I shared with your last podcast. That's what I would want to know. That HR analytics or people analytics in HR is a very output-driven activity. So we drum roll on the output, and then we jump to the next one. And I call the last mile problem because the real deal, what the business really cares, is from output to outcome. They care about the outcome. So my question for my peers and the leaders in the space is like, what are they doing, and how do we collectively? I want to get these thoughts. Convert that from an outcome-driven based people analytics than an output-driven people analytics. And it's not an analytical only problem. It's also 100%. HR needs to help.
Yeah.
So because that's where we really, anything we do, output is important. I'm not saying it's not, but we stop there. And that last mile problem is what I want to solve.
Yeah.
I would love to hear how people are
That's
thinking
such a great
about
question.
it or even implementing.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's such a great. That's such a great question. And again, it can go in so many different directions as well. Very last question.
Sure.
What advice would you give to the talent, the leaders that are coming into the space? And what would be your parting piece of advice to people analytics leaders, HR leaders coming into the PA space?
Yeah. As I said on that point of what a people analytics leader needs to have is some of the pieces I would say is what I would say from a team, both sides. One is this game has got to be played together. Number one, you need to have balance in this game because don't go on one sided track about all data all the time. Stop with data. It's there. But also try to understand the other side, which I mentioned. Have a lot of patience and tolerance, which I said, and have fun with this. It's not like, and when your leader says cleaning data is good, there's a reason why. So appreciate the experiences of your HR teams.
Yeah,
they know exactly what they're doing. So that's kind of what some of the few pieces of advice, like tolerant, patience, be a team player, and have fun.
Love it.
What I would say. Yeah.
Well, listen, it's always fun having the conversations with you, and I always appreciate it as well. And so many great insights. Super excited to share this with our audience. Where can people connect with you if they want to reach out, say hi? Where's the best place?
I'm still on LinkedIn, and my email is straightforward as first.last@g.com.
No worries. Well, listen, I'm going to delete your email out so you don't get loads of emails. But connect with Aaron on LinkedIn.
It's on LinkedIn. People are much smarter, Chris, than get at me. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn.
All right. So listen, I wish you all the best until next week. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Take care.
Thanks.